guys, it's Allison from Alison's Notebook, and today I'm going to be giving you guys 10 tips on how to be happy. Now, before I even start telling you guys about these 10 tips, the one thing that I will say is that I am not a clinically sad or depressed person as far as I know. I have struggled with being sad, and I have gone through things like severe loss and grief in the past, and I have had to work through some of those things. When I had to work through those things, I found therapy really helpful. And so I'm just prefacing this video with the fact that I am not a professional. These are tips that I find very practical for a normal amount of sadness or grief. And if you have a serious problem, I would highly recommend counseling. And that's exactly why in this video, I've actually partnered with BetterHelp to get you guys help if you need it. So I'm gonna provide a link in the description. And if you feel like you are sad for a very long period of time, if it's affecting your life in a very negative way, then these 10 tips may not be that helpful. You may need more help. My first tip on how to be happy sounds cheesy, but it actually works, and that is to smile. You guys might have heard this tip before. I know I heard it as a kid that it takes a lot less muscular effort to smile than it does to frown. It's like actually physically easier to smile, and so that's one reason why you should smile more. But I've actually heard that it can make you happier to practice smiling. So even though this tip sounds really simple, I would practice it anyway. Practice smiling at strangers, waving, being friendly, and that could actually help you to be happier. My next tip on how to be happier is to make things special. By making something special, you're creating something that's important. You're creating a space for yourself to be creative and safe. And so I'll give you guys a couple of examples of this. When my husband was single, he used to hate doing the dishes, and this was a long time before I knew him, but apparently his kitchen was kind of a mess, and someone gave him some really good advice, and that was the area above his sink. They suggested that he change the lighting, that he redo some of the kitchen area, not like an extensive remodel, but basically creating a space that was visually appealing and then turning dishwashing into a meditative habit. And he actually, to this day, still enjoys dishes. This is time to do something that is quiet and meditative. It doesn't take a lot of concentration, so I can let my mind run. And so that's just one example of how you can make something special. For many, many years, most of my career history, I have eaten lunch at my desk. My mentality is I want to be here for less time, and so I'm going to eat at my desk, and I want to leave as soon as possible, even though that never happens. I never leave any sooner. I just work all day and eat through lunch. I started, though, recently, really pretty recently in the last year, making sure for the most part that I eat my lunch somewhere besides my desk. And I might still get on my phone and get on Instagram or watch a YouTube video, but I don't want to sit and work while I'm eating my lunch because I need that brain break. That's another example of something I make special. My next tip for how to be happy is to cultivate optimism. Now you have optimism where you try to see things as glass half full, and you have pessimism where you see things as glass half empty. And when I say that I want you to cultivate optimism, I'm not saying you should have blind optimism. I'm not saying you should say things are great when they're not, but just know that everything is temporary. The good things are temporary and the bad things are temporary. And also know that there are solutions to most problems. So whatever I happen to be worrying about, for the most part, it's never going to be as bad as what actually happens. I can think of very little exceptions to that rule. And so practice optimism, practice looking at the bright side, and practicing this will make you happier. The next two things are two more practices I want you to do. Number one, practice gratitude. I want you to start thinking about things that you're grateful for, especially when you're in a bad mood. I know people who have a really hard time with this, and when they're in a bad mood and I try to get them to start listing things they're grateful for, it makes them very angry. But it really does help to practice things that you're grateful for. The other thing I want you to practice is finding solutions instead of complaining. And I've actually read that listening to people complain over and over again and complaining yourself over and over again can actually literally make you dumber. And so I'm very careful now about complaining. And my sister and I, we practice this a lot where we'll call each other and we'll vent, and then we'll realize we're complaining and we get into solution, or we just stop. And that's an option. If you find yourself complaining about the same thing over and over again, if you can't think of a solution, just stop talking about it. sleep on it. I'm not saying you should ignore it or stuff your feelings down, but sleep on it and see if when processing the next day, if maybe you can come up with a different way of thinking about it. The next thing I want you to do goes in line with some of the other tips I've already told you, which is to sink in the good stuff. When good things happen to you, bask in them. When you see good things, bask in them. Really, when something good happens to you, don't wonder when the other shoe's gonna drop. Don't wonder when it's gonna end. Really take the time to appreciate that moment and let it be a good moment for you. The next tip for how to be happy is to show yourself compassion. So some of the things that can make me sad are when I make a really big mistake. And the thing is, whatever mistakes I've made, I can't go back and fix. I just can't. They're over. That moment is over. But what I can do is forgive myself, show myself compassion, and think about what I can do differently next time. If I'm just dwelling on the past and the mistakes that I've made, it's not really going to be that helpful. But if I can use those negative things to create a more positive behavior in the future, then I've turned that negative thing into something positive and constructive and much more useful. My 9th tip for how to be happier is to heal past traumas. So now we're like getting into the deep stuff here, and this is a little bit out of my professional depth, but I found when I was younger in my early 20s that I was hitting a lot of the same quirks and problems over and over again in relationships, and like I mentioned in my drinking video, like heavy drinking, and it was just these negative things that I kept doing over and over again, and I felt hopeless and sad. And a lot of those negative behaviors were a result of traumas that I'd experienced in the past. And so that's part of what was so helpful about going to therapy for me, was working through those. Now, depending on the severity of your trauma, you might be able to go to kind of a specialized support group, or you might need to go to therapy to get help from a specialist, or maybe you can just talk it out with someone who's had a similar experience and come out on the other side. There are, of course, many ways you can deal with past traumas, and I don't presume to know the best way for you. But if there are negative things that have happened to you in the past, especially if they are significant negative things, if you've never really dealt with those or let those feelings bubble up to talk about them and change your mindset, those things are probably contributing to an unhappiness or unrest in your life, and I would highly recommend you deal with them. And then my last tip is to get help. And this goes back to what I said in the beginning. I don't presume to be a professional on how to get happy. I do know that I am pretty good at having an optimistic personality and having fun and being lighthearted in general. However, I realized that there was a point in my life when I needed professional help, just like there might be a point in your life when you need it, which is why I partner with BetterHelp. And of course, you don't have to take advantage of that link below. There are many resources out there. So I hope this video was helpful. If you guys have any tips that I left out on how to be happy, please post them down below. It will help me. It's going to help other people. And so I really like seeing the discussion and seeing your guys' ideas. Make sure to like this video if you like this video, and make sure to subscribe so you can see my videos. Every Thursday I put out a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
Even my cat loves your show.